So you are busy anyways, right? And along comes your manager and wants to do something that in the first place is annoying you, giving you another goal, delegating something else for you to do. And this is typically the moment where I go like, holy shit, no, why? And you're having the idea that you are anyways already maybe doing 110% of the work, and this is where workload should be, and you feel that maybe adding an extra project might just add some extra bonus work on top. And this is typically something that we don't like to have that well. Now, the question is, how do you deal with this? And how can you make sure that actually this is an opportunity in order to get maybe everything into 100%? But how do you do the shrinking? How do you make sure that delegation is working right? And how do you make sure that you are getting even better through accepting a delegation that gives you the first feeling of, that's not going to be good? So this is what we want to discuss within this video. What is going on in terms of delegation? How can you go ahead and how do you walk yourself through? And really understanding, how do I handle delegation well, that I grow with it? So the first step that we take is to actually have a quick look at the work that you're doing at the moment. And to do that, the first step after the delegation is doing nothing. Just hearing what your manager wants you to do more, and then taking some time and using that time for an analysis. So understanding what is it that you're doing at the moment. So what are the projects you're completing at the moment? And what are the processes that you're operating at the moment? Projects are things that are done at a certain point in time, and then you consider them finished. And processes are the things that will occur all around, and they are started by a trigger, and then they are finished, and the next time a trigger starts, they're finished until then again. So building a house is a project. Once the house is built, it's ready. Cleaning the house is a process. It is triggered by the house being dirty, and then it's finished, and then the house is clean. Now, those are the typical two things that you are doing already. Those projects can be formal projects where you really have a project description, you are the project owner, or you're having a role in the project team. It can also be informal, like somebody told you, please make sure that this happens, and then you just start doing it and you move yourself forward in order to get it done. So what are the things that you're doing at the moment anyways? The second thing is ask for the delegation. So what is the exact goal of it? What for do you need to accept the delegation? And this is not a why. A why asks for reasons and backgrounds. The what for is, what is the purpose of you completing that delegation? So in how far will the organization be better off once you have completed it? Now, doing that, having the analysis first and then thinking about your delegation are the first two important steps. And getting the goals straight is giving you basically the base purpose of what should you complete. Now, with all those things, you kind of have a set of priority lists, right? So you have all the things you need to do and all the things that people expect you to do newly, like that new delegation. Now, one could take that list and accumulate the sum total of hours and say, well, that is too much or that is not doable. But that would be a little bit too quick. One thing to do then is go for a time planning. And there's actually 2 steps of time planning. The first step of time planning is actually you take the goal that should be delegated to you and you delegate the strategy. So you can imagine like you're doing a timeline, and here is the level of completion. And in the end, you want to have 100% level of completion at a certain time. So what you do now is you think of different ways in order to complete it. Typically, we are only having one strategy in mind intuitively. And that's actually something that a Nobel Prize laureate got his Nobel Prize for. He said, we humans have a basic tendency, and that is the tendency of not finding the best solution, but taking the first solution typically. So the normal human tendency is going like, well, I have an idea with a few milestones, and that is the process, and I have that in mind, so I decide for that. Now, this is something that you can do, but typically the first idea you have is not the best idea you have. Now, ask yourself creative, hypothetical, difficult word, hypothetical questions. How can we make that happen? And you had been making many things happen. If you look at some of the boats delivered and some of the timings and some of the trade shows that you accomplished, you as a team created many things where other people said, that's not possible. And you might be in a position where you as a team go like, that's not possible. But maybe there is another idea and another step process where you can sooner and quicker reach the goal. Now, ask yourself hypothetical questions like, if we would want to do that with half of the resources, how would we do that? If we would want to do it in half of the time, how we want to do that? If we would completely rethink the way of doing it, how would we be able to do that in order to get it right? Now, this is something you first do for the new delegation that you're having here. But then you also do that for the big processes and projects that you are doing at the moment. I once had a team that was taking about 40% time for one process that once we thought about it, one colleague said, well, we could also automate that. And it took 4 weeks to automate it. And after that, the whole resource of the whole team was suddenly free. Now, look for those things. And the only way to find those things is really thinking through the bigger resource-taking projects and processes to come to an idea of getting like, okay, what can we leave out? What can we optimize? With that, you make a final plan. And that final plan is the question of what do you want to do now and what do you want to suggest your manager? Your final plan contains basically all the strategies for all the changes that you want to make. So maybe you want to improve a certain project that you're doing and you want to have a certain strategy for the new delegation. So what you then do is you create a plan per change. So how do you want to do that? How do you want to go along? How do you want to influence the colleagues to join along? How do you actually want to do that? What are the resources that you need for that? And what cannot happen? So what can your boss not do? What are the no-goes? It cannot happen that a colleague doesn't support you, for example, because you need it. So you come up with what are the resources and the constraints, the things that you need in order to fix it, and the things that cannot happen for you in order to get that plan done. And with that, you go back to your boss and you discuss that final plan. Maybe you need to negotiate the resources and the constraints. Maybe you need to discuss the improvements and the opportunities that you find here. Maybe you want to challenge the strategies that you came up with. All those things are perfectly fine and perfectly doable and perfectly fair if you want to discuss it with your boss. It helps if you take your manager kind of through that thinking process that we're having here to have him understand what is going on. Sometimes it might be that after a lot of thinking, you cannot find any idea on how to do that is actually working given the resources and constraints that you reasonably can get. And then you need to see what else you can do in order to make it happen. The very important thing is here, first of all, the thinking backwards from the result. So what is the result up here? And then thinking backwards on how you could do that. That is one of the important properties. Also, finding out milestones and checkpoints are things that you can take in here and suggest your boss some check-ins. So you don't do spontaneous control where your boss might show up and say, hey, how far are you in the project? But you suggest your boss to have a check-in at some certain points in time and thus make the process more controllable. You can also agree on, let's try it to the first milestone and then let's recalibrate and let's optimize, of course. You can go for KPIs, key performance indicators. So what are the measures and the numbers that you can measure to know that you're on the good track? Also, what are the KRIs, the key result indicators? So what is your definition of done? How do you exactly know that a milestone is reached? Those are the things you can also as well come up with. And finally, as a fifth step, you put it in the management system. So you'll put it in, for example, project portfolio management. You can agree with your manager to just check in every week in your normal meeting structure. You can discuss a certain level of reporting or not. Now, in the end, the goal is that you are here sitting and saying, I can accept that delegation. And I can accept it because I have a plan, I have the resources, I know what is needed to be done, so I am sure I can have it under control, and I'm happy to have regular check-ins and show that I have it under control. Or another ideal situation is that you discuss with your manager that you cannot do that because there's not enough resources, and then you discuss how else it can be managed within the organization in order to make sure that this thing is really getting done. Why? Well, because if your manager comes up with important goals and suggesting you take them over, well, taking over goals that are not finished in the end because you didn't believe in it or you hadn't had the right resources is something that is hurting the organization more than honest and clear look at the resources beforehand to identifying that something cannot work from the outset. So generating that clarity, generating that understanding and making sure that you only take over responsibilities that you want to handle and that you can handle is something that makes your life easy and that makes everybody else's life easy. And finding ways of optimization here, making sure that you get things done that in the first you went like, oh, that's too much. I don't think it's ever possible. That you take those opportunities, you grow from them, you find ways to do that in order to perform better, which makes making a better career. So when your boss now approaches you with a certain level of delegation, that is maybe something that you can start to go through, having those 5 steps to come to a clear accepted delegation that is helpful for you and your boss as well.